In the stillness of night, when the world quiets down and thoughts begin to drift, let us open a door to a past that has been hidden for centuries. This story is not just about kings or battles, not only about armies or thrones, but about whispers in the corridors of power, secrets guarded in candlelit chambers, and a silent war fought in the name of faith and survival. Tonight, we begin the tale of the Vatican's darkest secret, the hidden war between the Knights Templar and the mysterious Order of Assassins. To understand this story, we must go back, far back, to the age of the Crusades. It was a time when Europe was restless, when the papacy in Rome sought to expand not only spiritual authority but also worldly power. The Church was not simply a place of worship, it was a force of politics, influence, and wealth. Within this setting arose the Knights Templar, a military order bound by vows of poverty and obedience, yet destined to become one of the richest and most feared brotherhoods in medieval history. The Templars began humbly. In the early 12th century, a handful of knights gathered in Jerusalem, swearing to protect pilgrims traveling through dangerous lands. They wore simple white mantles marked with a red cross. Their mission appeared pure, noble, and entirely spiritual. Yet as the decades passed, the Templars grew beyond their original vows. They built fortresses, commanded armies, and established one of the earliest forms of international banking. Gold from across Europe flowed into their coffers, and soon, kings themselves borrowed from the Templar treasury. But where power grows, so too does fear. The Vatican watched carefully. Officially, the Templars answered to the Pope. In reality, they were becoming a force unto themselves. Independent, wealthy, skilled in war, and bound by their own secret rituals, the Templars straddled the thin line between servants of the Church and rivals of its power. This is where our story deepens, where shadows begin to lengthen. For in the East, beyond the deserts and mountains, another brotherhood thrived. They were called the Hashishin, or Assassins. To the Crusaders, they were figures of terror, men who moved silently, who struck suddenly, and who vanished without trace. Legends surrounded them, stories of hidden fortresses high in the Persian mountains, of followers who would sacrifice themselves without hesitation, and of leaders who commanded loyalty through mystery and fear. The Assassins were not a great empire, not an army like the Crusaders. They were something different, something more elusive, a network of spies, killers, and believers united by a secret creed. The Vatican feared them, and the Templars hated them. And yet, in strange moments of history, enemies sometimes recognize one another, even respect one another. There are whispers of Templars and Assassins meeting in secret, not always as foes, but sometimes as allies, depending on who the greater enemy of the moment might be. This shifting dance of allegiance and betrayal formed the foundation of the hidden war. Imagine, for a moment, the world of that era. Picture vast deserts lit by burning suns, Crusader castles standing like islands of stone in foreign lands, and mountain fortresses that no invader could breach. Imagine the Pope in Rome, surrounded by advisors and cardinals, hearing reports of victories and defeats from the Holy Land, and behind every parchment report, a second layer of truth hidden away, a truth not for public ears. It is in this hidden layer where our story lies. The Vatican's darkest secret is not simply that wars were fought, or that men died for faith and glory. The secret lies in what was never told openly, that the Church may have sanctioned certain alliances, may have turned a blind eye to dealings with enemies, and may even have nurtured a rivalry between the Templars and Assassins that was never meant for the world to know. Why? because power is fragile, and sometimes it is safer to keep two wolves fighting each other than to let them both turn their fangs upon you. As you listen, allow the rhythm of the story to settle like a gentle tide. Imagine parchment manuscripts, written in secret, carried across mountains by silent riders. Imagine cloisters echoing with whispered conversations, knights kneeling in dimly lit chapels, and hooded men slipping through shadows. These images are not just fragments of fantasy, they are the threads of history woven into a tapestry that was almost forgotten. The Templars expanded their influence in both East and West. In France, in England, in Spain, their estates grew larger, their castles taller, their banks richer. Pilgrims entrusted them with wealth and safety, nobles entrusted them with secrets, and kings entrusted them with debts. Yet behind the stone walls of their commanderies, the Templars preserved rituals and knowledge drawn not only from Christian tradition but from lands they had touched. Wisdom from Jewish scholars, sciences from the Islamic world, fragments of philosophy from ancient Greece, and perhaps even stranger knowledge passed in secrecy. The assassins, by contrast, kept no such castles in Europe. Their strength was not in fortresses but in fear. Their leader, known as the Old Man of the Mountain, commanded loyalty so deep that his followers were said to walk willingly into death. Though stories about drug-induced visions and gardens of paradise may be more legend than fact, what mattered was the terror their name inspired. No king, no crusader, no sultan felt safe when an assassin's dagger might strike in the dark. When Templars and assassins crossed paths, sparks flew. Sometimes they fought openly in skirmishes. Sometimes they made temporary truces against greater enemies, such as ambitious sultans or rival crusader lords. And sometimes, just sometimes, they exchanged knowledge, techniques of war, methods of secrecy, even whispers of philosophy. For though their faiths opposed one another, both orders sought something beyond simple conquest. They sought survival, influence, and, in their own ways, truth. The Vatican, of course, could not admit this. To the faithful, the Templars were holy warriors, and the assassins were heathen murderers. But behind the curtain, papal envoys knew more. Reports came to Rome of secret meetings in mountain valleys, of unexpected alliances, of unexplained assassinations that benefited not only Muslim rulers but also Christian kings. The truth was too complex, too dangerous to tell. And so it became a secret, a dark secret, that the Vatican kept buried. Tonight, as we begin this long journey through forgotten chapters, remember that history is not only what is written in chronicles, but also what is erased. The Vatican's darkest secret lies in the erasure, in the silence between the lines, in the war between the Templars and assassins that was both real and hidden. And as you listen, let the gentle unfolding of these memories carry you deeper into rest, like a candle slowly burning low in a quiet chamber. This is only the beginning, the dawn of shadows, and the war is only about to begin. The story of the Vatican's darkest secret continues not in silence, but in the clamor of growth and ambition. To understand the hidden war between the Templars and the assassins, we must look more deeply into the rise of the Templar order itself, into the soil from which its power grew, and the roots that reached so far and so wide that even kings trembled before them. When the Knights Templar were first blessed by the papacy, they were viewed as humble protectors of pilgrims. The world saw in them a model of Christian piety, warriors who renounced personal wealth, men who lived by strict rules, eating simple meals, wearing plain garments, sleeping in communal halls. They were, at first, admired as holy soldiers, pure of heart, fearless in battle, dedicated to Christ. Yet within a century, their story had changed. They had become something much larger, much more dangerous, and far more mysterious. The Templars were not only fighters. They became organizers, administrators, and financiers. Castles in the Holy Land needed supplies, and so the Templars built networks across Europe to gather food, horses, weapons, and men. Farmers worked their lands in France, England, and Iberia, sending revenues to the east. Merchants borrowed money from them, nobles deposited treasures with them, and soon the Templars acted as the bankers of Christendom. It was a remarkable transformation. A knight in white with a red cross might appear poor in public, yet behind him stood a system of wealth and influence more complex than that of any single king. They created a system of credit and letters of exchange that allowed pilgrims to deposit money in one city and withdraw it in another, safe from bandits along the road. In this way, the Templars became the protectors not only of pilgrims' bodies, but also of their purses. The Vatican encouraged this growth, for it served the Church to have a powerful order loyal to Rome. But soon, the balance shifted. Loyalty is a fragile thing when it is mixed with gold and power. The Templars answered to the Pope, yes, but they also answered to their own Grand Master, who commanded respect and obedience from knights across Europe and the Holy Land. The Grand Master of the Templars stood almost as an equal to kings, receiving envoys, commanding armies, and making decisions that affected nations. Meanwhile, the assassins watched from the east. From their strongholds in Persia and Syria, they saw the rise of this Christian brotherhood with wary eyes. The assassins had long survived by exploiting divisions among larger powers. They were too small to conquer nations, but too skilled and too feared to be easily destroyed. Their methods, stealth, infiltration, sudden death, were tools designed for precision rather than conquest. Against the lumbering might of kingdoms and crusader states, they were like needles against armor. Yet against the Templars, they found an equal, an order not only of swords, but of minds. In whispered reports sent to Rome, the Vatican heard tales of strange encounters between Templars and assassins. There were rumors of secret negotiations, of truces agreed upon in hidden valleys, of mutual respect forged on battlefields where one recognized the other's courage. At times, it seemed the Templars and assassins were destined not only to fight but also to mirror each other. Both orders were religious, both were bound by oaths, both lived by strict codes, and both believed they served a higher cause. Yet their gods were different, their rituals were different, and their worlds were separated by faith and geography. The Templars, though sworn to Christ, were accused by their enemies of practicing strange rites. Whispered accusations claimed that they worshipped idols, that they spat on the cross, that they held midnight ceremonies with secrets too dark to describe. Perhaps these were lies, born of jealousy and fear. Or perhaps there was a grain of truth, for the Templars had traveled far and learned much from the cultures they encountered. They were not ignorant men. They studied architecture, medicine, navigation, and the sciences of the East. Some say they also studied the hidden arts, the mysteries of alchemy, the secrets of numbers, the lore of stars. Such knowledge, combined with wealth and power, made them dangerous. To the Vatican, the Templars were a blessing and a threat at the same time. To kings, they were creditors who could not easily be repaid. To common people, They were both heroes and villains, feared and admired. And to the assassins, they were rivals in a world that had little room for two secret brotherhoods. As the years passed, the Templars built fortresses across the Holy Land. Great stone castles at key passes, towers on high cliffs, fortifications that seemed impossible to breach. They became not only soldiers but lords, rulers of land and keepers of treasure. And yet, for all their might, they could not defeat time. Crusader states began to crumble. Jerusalem was lost. One by one, the strongholds fell. And with each defeat, the Templars' desperation grew. It was in these moments of loss that contact with the assassins became most intriguing. Some chronicles hint that when Christian and Muslim armies clashed, assassins sometimes struck from the shadows to tip the balance. At times, their blades were turned against Muslim leaders who threatened the Templars. At other times, they struck Christians who stood in the way of their survival. The line between enemy and ally blurred in the dust of war. The Vatican knew of these things but spoke little. It could not admit that its holy warriors might negotiate with heretics, or that the blood of fellow Christians might be spilled through assassin daggers for Templar benefit. Such knowledge, if known widely, would destroy the illusion of purity. And so the Vatican scribes wrote carefully, leaving blank spaces where truth might have been, and ensuring that silence buried the secrets too dangerous to tell. Imagine now a vast Templar fortress, its walls glimmering in the sun, its halls echoing with prayers and chants. Knights kneel in silence, their swords resting before them. But outside those walls, in mountain passes, silent figures watch. The assassins, cloaked in shadows, observe, measure, and wait. Between the stone of the castle and the mist of the mountains, a silent understanding passes, a recognition that both orders live by the blade, both are guided by unseen masters, and both are destined to clash again and again. The rise of the Templars was not merely the rise of soldiers. It was the birth of a mystery that even now has not been fully unraveled. Their wealth, their secrets, their hidden dealings with both friend and foe, these formed the roots of the Vatican's darkest secret. A secret not about holy war alone, but about what was done in silence, in the name of survival, in the shadow of faith. This is the story that deepens as the night grows quiet, the story of two brotherhoods who reflected each other in ways the world never knew. And as you rest, let the rhythm of the past lull you into calm, like waves of time gently breaking on distant shores. For the Templars' rise is only half the tale, and the assassins are waiting in the darkness, ready to step into the light. While the Templars rose in glory across Europe and the Holy Land, another order was weaving its threads in silence. The assassins, known in their own tongue as the Nazari, were fewer in number but greater in mystery. Their name alone became a whisper of fear across the Middle East. To rulers and generals, the word assassin meant sudden death, delivered by a hand unseen, guided by a purpose unknown. The assassins were born out of division within Islam itself. Their story began not in Jerusalem, nor in Rome, but in Persia, where conflicts of succession and faith split communities. From this soil of dispute rose Hassan I-Sabah, the figure remembered as the founder of the order. A brilliant strategist, Hassan saw that brute force could not secure survival against stronger armies. Instead, he built a different kind of power, one rooted in loyalty, secrecy, and precision. Hassan established his base in Alamat, a fortress high in the Persian mountains. From there, the assassins spread influence across the region. They did not seek to conquer vast lands or rule over empires. Instead, they struck at key figures, generals, viziers, rulers who threatened their survival. By removing a single man, they could change the course of battles, alter the plans of kings, and ensure the endurance of their brotherhood. Legends quickly grew around them. Chroniclers claimed that assassin recruits were shown visions of paradise, that gardens filled with rivers and maidens awaited those who obeyed without question. Whether true or exaggerated, these stories magnified their reputation. The image of followers willing to embrace death with smiles upon their faces filled their enemies with dread. No wall was high enough, no guard numerous enough, to stop an assassin who had already accepted his own death. To the Crusaders, the assassins were both an enemy and a curiosity. Some Crusader princes feared them, while others negotiated with them. There are tales of assassins visiting Crusader courts, even sending envoys to Christian kings. The boundaries between faiths blurred in these moments, for survival often outweighed doctrine. It was in these ambiguous spaces that the assassins and Templars sometimes crossed paths, not always in open battle, but in covert arrangements that remain half-hidden in history. The Vatican, far away in Rome, received reports of the assassins that were often cloaked in rumor. Were they heretics, demons, or merely men who used terror as a weapon? The truth was not clear. What was clear, however, was that the assassins represented a new kind of threat, an enemy not bound by the rules of conventional war. Armies could be defeated in battle, castles could be besieged and starved, but how could one defend against a single dagger in the night? The Templars, with their castles and armies, were the opposite of the assassins. Yet opposites often recognize in each other a reflection of themselves. Both orders were bound by loyalty to leaders whose authority seemed absolute. Both lived apart from ordinary society, following rules that set them apart. Both were feared for their dedication and their willingness to act in ways others would not dare. Some chronicles even suggest that there were times when the Templars and assassins communicated directly. A truce here, an alliance there, a whispered promise exchanged in the shadow of greater wars. Perhaps they saw in each other a kind of brotherhood of outsiders, each despised, each admired, each powerful in ways others could not understand. But make no mistake, respect did not erase rivalry. The assassins were defenders of their faith and their sect, and the Templars were sworn to Christ and the Pope. Whenever their interests collided, the result was blood. And yet, strangely, history remembers as many moments of peace between them as it does of conflict. That balance of hostility and understanding formed the hidden rhythm of their relationship, one that the Vatican could not openly acknowledge. Imagine now the mountains of Persia. Snow lies on distant peaks, while lower slopes are dotted with villages and hidden paths. Somewhere, high above, stands Alamut, fortress of the assassins, a place so secretive that even Crusader spies could barely describe it. Inside, men in white robes train in silence, practicing stealth, learning to blend with crowds, mastering the art of patience. Their knives are small, but their determination is vast. Meanwhile, far to the west, in Europe, the Vatican worries. The Pope sits in chambers lit by candles, reading reports carried by exhausted messengers from the east. Words like assassin and murder appear again and again. Yet alongside them are other words: agreement, truce, understanding. The Vatican frowns, for nothing is more dangerous than an enemy who can sometimes be an ally. The Vatican's darkest secret begins to take shape here, in the shadows of the assassins. For the Church understood that the war was not only between Christendom and Islam, but also between hidden orders, each moving beneath the surface, each capable of shaping the future in ways armies could not. The assassins were not merely killers. They were a mirror to the Templars, and their war was not always visible, not always recorded, but always real. As you rest, let these images drift like dreams. The silent approach of an assassin on a moonlit night, the echo of prayers in a mountain fortress, the distant sound of steel on stone as a dagger is sharpened. Let the rhythm of secrecy and survival lull you deeper into calm, for the story continues, and the Vatican's secret has only begun to unfold. Far from the deserts and mountains, in the heart of Europe, the Vatican watched the world with cautious eyes. The Pope sat not only as the spiritual head of Christendom, but also as a ruler of lands, a leader of politics, and a guardian of secrets. To the faithful masses, the Vatican represented holiness, prayer, and salvation. Yet behind marble walls and beneath painted ceilings, the papal court was a place of strategy, calculation, and at times, fear. As the Templars gained strength and the assassins grew infamous, the Vatican found itself at the center of a dangerous balance. On the one hand, the Templars were its soldiers, sworn to protect Christendom. On the other, the assassins were enemies of the faith, tools of heresy and chaos. Yet the Vatican could not ignore the strange, shifting relationship between the two. Reports carried by envoys and spies suggested that sometimes the Templars and assassins fought, and other times they cooperated. The truth was unsettling. The lines of loyalty were blurred, and the Vatican's control was not absolute. Imagine the papal palace at night. Candles flicker in golden holders, and corridors echo with the quiet steps of monks carrying parchment scrolls. Cardinals whisper in hushed tones about battles in faraway lands, about alliances struck without papal approval, about rumors too dangerous to write openly. Some speak of assassin envoys welcomed in crusader courts. Others murmur of Templars engaging in negotiations with men the Church had declared enemies of Christ. What was the Vatican to do? To expose such dealings would weaken its image of divine authority. To ignore them was to risk losing control. And so, silence became its weapon. Silence and secrecy. Papal scribes wrote chronicles of holy wars, but they left out the hidden treaties, the exchanges of knowledge, the secret truces. The official histories proclaimed Christendom's righteousness, while the Vatican's private archives, locked away in chambers that few would ever enter, told another story. Those archives, filled with letters, coded messages, and sealed reports, became the foundation of what we now call the Vatican's darkest secrets. For the Vatican, the Templars were both a blessing and a curse. They were powerful warriors, yes, but they were also too independent. They answered to their Grand Master as much as to the Pope. Their network of castles, lands, and treasuries stretched across Europe, creating a state within a state. Kings envied them, nobles feared them, and even bishops wondered if the Templars might one day challenge papal authority itself. To keep such men under control required careful balance. The assassins, meanwhile, presented another dilemma. They were enemies, yet not enemies like any other. Unlike Muslim armies that could be fought in open battle, the assassins could not be defeated by swords alone. They existed in shadows, striking unpredictably, their influence spreading through fear. Some within the Vatican wondered whether they could be used, whether their daggers might be turned toward the Church's own enemies. Others feared even to speak of such things aloud, for to suggest alliance with heretics was itself a sin. It is whispered that papal envoys sometimes traveled in secret, bearing messages not meant for public eyes. Perhaps they carried warnings to the Templars. Perhaps they carried instructions to look the other way when an assassin struck a certain target. These whispers cannot be proven, yet the gaps in history suggest more than coincidence. How else can we explain sudden deaths of powerful men, deaths that benefited both the Vatican and the Templars, yet were claimed by the assassins? To the people of Europe, none of this was visible. They saw only the surface: holy wars preached from pulpits, indulgences sold to fund crusades, knights marching beneath banners of the cross. They heard stories of the assassins as demons in the East, heretics who corrupted souls. They admired the Templars as holy warriors, defenders of Christendom. But what they did not see, what they could not be allowed to see, was the fragile game of power unfolding behind closed doors in Rome. The Vatican's darkest secret lies in this duplicity. Publicly, it condemned the assassins as enemies of God. Privately, it may have tolerated their existence, even manipulated their actions. Publicly, it exalted the Templars as loyal servants. Privately, it feared their independence and watched them with suspicion. In this shadow play, truth and falsehood intertwined, and history became a mask hiding deeper realities. Picture the Pope, robed in white, raising his hand in blessing to the crowd in St. Peter's Square. Thousands kneel, their eyes filled with faith, their hearts believing in the purity of the Church. Yet within the Vatican walls, after the crowds disperse, the same Pope may sit with advisers, listening to reports of secret wars, of shifting alliances, of daggers in the night. The contrast is stark: holiness in public, strategy in private. This duality is the essence of the Vatican's darkest secret. The Church that claimed to hold the keys of heaven also held the keys of earthly intrigue. And in its silent watch, it allowed two brotherhoods, the Templars and the Assassins, to clash, cooperate, and coexist in ways the world was never meant to know. As you drift deeper into calm, let these images settle gently in your mind. Candlelit halls of the Vatican, scrolls sealed with wax, whispers that fade into silence, and a Pope who knows more than he will ever say. For the night is long, and the story stretches onward, through shadows and secrets, toward revelations yet to come. By now, the stage was set. The Templars had risen to great power, the assassins had secured their mountain strongholds, and the Vatican watched in silence, balancing faith with fear. It was only a matter of time before the silent tension erupted into action. The hidden war between these two brotherhoods, though seldom recorded openly, began to leave faint marks in the chronicles of the age. The Holy Land was a place of shifting sands, both literally and politically. Crusader states rose and fell with alarming speed. Kings, lords, and sultans made alliances one year and broke them the next. In this unstable environment, the Templars and Assassins became more than mere soldiers. They became players in a game of survival, where every move mattered and every choice could tip the balance of power. Templar knights marched beneath banners of the cross, but their minds were as sharp as their swords. They built castles not only for defense but also for control of trade routes, mountain passes, and fertile lands. They knew that to control territory was to control wealth, and to control wealth was to control kings. The Assassins, by contrast, built no sprawling kingdoms. They relied on precision, on the quiet strike that removed a single enemy at the perfect moment. Their power was not in armies, but in the fear that armies carried in their hearts, knowing that no general, no sultan, no prince was safe from an assassin's blade. It was inevitable that these two methods of power would clash. The Templars, with their armies, threatened the independence of the assassins' mountain fortresses. The assassins, with their daggers, threatened the stability of the Templars' alliances. And yet, strangely, both also found reasons to keep each other alive. For the assassins, the Templars were sometimes useful allies against rival Muslim powers. For the Templars, the assassins could weaken enemies the knights could not easily defeat in open battle. Thus, their war was not a simple struggle of extermination. It was a dance of rivalry, marked by moments of violence and moments of uneasy cooperation. Chronicles speak of strange encounters. In one account, Templars are said to have marched through mountain valleys only to find themselves shadowed by assassins, who did not strike but instead delivered a message. In another, assassins are rumored to have spared Christian leaders at the request of Templars, striking Muslim foes instead. These stories are clouded by rumor, for neither order wished to admit such dealings publicly. Yet the very existence of such tales hints at the complexity of their relationship. The Vatican, of course, could not reveal any of this. To the faithful, the war was simple: Christians against Muslims, good against evil, light against darkness. To admit that Templars and assassins sometimes shared interests would shatter the image of purity. And so, the Vatican wrote one version of history for the people and kept another version locked away. The hidden war was not for common ears. Imagine a night in the Holy Land. The desert air cools after the day's heat, stars stretch across the sky, and silence lies heavy on the land. In the courtyard of a Templar castle, knights stand watch, their armor glinting in torchlight. Beyond the walls, in the darkness of the hills, silent figures move, assassins, watching, waiting, measuring. They do not strike tonight, but their presence is felt, like a shadow across the moon. This was the nature of their war, a war of awareness, of constant vigilance, where even in peace there was no rest. The hidden war was not only about blades. It was also about knowledge. Both the Templars and assassins sought wisdom that stretched beyond ordinary understanding. The Templars gathered knowledge from east and west, preserving texts, studying sciences, and perhaps even seeking hidden truths in mysticism and alchemy. The assassins, too, prized learning, blending philosophy with strategy, and guiding their followers with a creed that transcended mere survival. When these two orders clashed, it was not only swords that met, but also ideas. The Vatican feared this more than anything. Knowledge was power, and uncontrolled knowledge was dangerous. The Church guarded doctrine carefully, declaring heresies whenever teachings strayed from orthodoxy. But the Templars, with their exposure to foreign lands and ideas, and the assassins, with their secretive philosophies, both threatened to open doors the Vatican wished to keep shut. In the silence of its halls, the Vatican began to wonder, was this hidden war between Templars and assassins a blessing or a curse? For as long as they fought each other, they were less likely to challenge Rome itself. But if ever they found common ground, if ever Templars and assassins truly joined forces, no power on earth could stop them. This possibility haunted the Vatican. And so, silence was maintained, secrecy preserved. The war continued in shadows, shaping events in ways unseen. As you listen now, let the story settle into your mind like the slow turning of an ancient page. Imagine daggers glinting in torchlight, scrolls carried across deserts, secrets whispered in cloisters. This was no ordinary war. It was a war of shadows, of silence, of secrets so deep that even now, centuries later, we are only beginning to uncover them. The hidden war had begun, and its echoes would linger for generations. The hidden war between the Templars and the Assassins was not fought in grand battles with banners and armies. It was fought in silence, in shadows, in moments that passed almost unnoticed by the world. Unlike the Clash of Kings, these struggles did not leave behind fields of corpses or smoking ruins. Instead, they left whispers, sudden deaths, and unexplained turns in the flow of history. The Assassins were masters of this kind of war. Their creed was not to defeat armies but to strike at the heart of power. They targeted men, not masses. A sultan who threatened them, a general who planned to march against them, a noble whose wealth endangered their survival. Any one of these could fall to an assassin's dagger. Often, the strike came in public, a warning to all who might oppose them. An assassin might appear in a crowded market, deliver his fatal blow, and vanish, or accept his own death in the act, leaving behind terror that echoed louder than any army's march. The Templars, by contrast, were not assassins but soldiers. They preferred castles to mountains, swords to daggers, armies to single blades. Yet even they learned to adapt. In their rivalry with the Assassins, the Templars came to understand that secrecy was as important as strength. They trained spies, they carried coded messages, they conducted missions that were never written into official chronicles. Slowly, their methods grew to resemble those of their shadowy enemies. This convergence of tactics blurred the line between the two orders. To some, it seemed that the Templars and Assassins were becoming reflections of each other. One born in the West, one in the East, each shaped by faith, each guided by secrecy, each feared by kings. And yet, for all their similarities, their purposes diverged. The Templars sought to preserve Christendom's strength and to serve, or appear to serve, the Vatican. The Assassins sought only survival and the endurance of their sect. Imagine a moonlit night in the streets of Acre, a bustling port city in the Holy Land. Merchants sleep in their houses, guards patrol the walls, and in the narrow alleys, a figure moves silently. He wears no armor, only a cloak to hide his shape. His dagger gleams for a moment in the faint light before disappearing into the shadows. Somewhere nearby, in a guarded chamber, a Templar commander sleeps. The assassin waits, watching, patient as the stars wheel overhead. The city itself is unaware of the tension that hovers like smoke. Tomorrow may dawn with news of death that alters the balance of power. Or perhaps not, for sometimes the dagger is withheld, the strike delayed, as part of a deeper game. These games of patience defined the hidden war. Each side tested the other, probed for weakness, struck when opportunity arose. And yet, strangely, there were also times of restraint. The Assassins did not always strike Templars, and the Templars did not always move against the Assassins. Instead, they seemed to circle each other, like predators recognizing the danger in the other's fangs. The Vatican, far away in Rome, was both fascinated and unsettled by this. Papal envoys sent letters warning of strange dealings between the orders. Some hinted that Templars and Assassins had exchanged prisoners, even information. Others spoke of moments when an assassin's strike seemed to benefit the Templars more than the assassins themselves. Was this coincidence or collaboration? The Vatican could not say for certain, and perhaps that uncertainty was more terrifying than open war. To the people of the Holy Land, the results were clear enough. Leaders died suddenly, alliances shifted without warning, and fear spread like smoke on the wind. Every assassination was a message. Every truce was a puzzle. And in the middle of it all stood the Templars, their white mantles stained with dust and sweat, their eyes ever watchful for blades in the dark. In truth, the hidden war was not only between the Templars and the assassins. It was also between perception and reality. Official histories told of holy knights and heretic killers, of light versus darkness. But the reality was far more complex. Secret pacts, shared knowledge, and grudging respect. The Vatican's darkest secret was not only that the war existed, but that it existed in a space where good and evil were no longer clear. As you listen, let your mind drift to the sound of footsteps in a silent corridor, the rustle of cloaks in the night, the faint whisper of steel leaving a sheath. Imagine the tension of waiting, the heartbeat of a man who knows he may not see the dawn. This was the world of the hidden war, quiet, unseen, and yet powerful enough to shape empires. The daggers in the dark told a story the Vatican could never confess, a story written not in ink but in silence and blood. And though centuries have passed, the echoes of that story remain, lingering in shadows, waiting to be heard. The Vatican never spoke openly of the conflict between Templars and assassins, but its shadow fell across every move they made. Rome had long understood that knowledge was as dangerous as any sword, and that secret wars could destroy empires more quickly than open ones. Behind the walls of cathedrals and palaces, papal advisors watched, calculated, and judged. To them, the hidden war was both a threat and an opportunity. The Templars were, in theory, loyal servants of the Church. They had sworn vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. They carried the cross upon their cloaks. But obedience was never simple when gold flowed through their hands in rivers and when kings turned to them for loans. The Vatican feared that the Templars were becoming too independent, too strong, and too willing to act without papal blessing. The assassins, on the other hand, owed nothing to Rome. They did not kneel before bishops or seek papal indulgences. Their allegiance was to their own creed, one that blended politics with philosophy, survival with strategy. To the Vatican, they were heretics, dangerous minds that dared to shape events without acknowledging the authority of the Church. And yet, even heretics had their uses. A dagger in the dark could sometimes serve Christendom's purposes better than 1,000 soldiers on the battlefield. It was this duality, fear and usefulness, that kept the Vatican silent. Papal letters, carefully hidden, hinted at secret instructions. Observe, but do not intervene. Guide, but do not reveal. Rome wanted the war to continue, but always within limits. Too much Templar strength might threaten the Pope himself. Too much assassin success might weaken Christian authority in the East. Balance had to be maintained, a balance that required silence and deception. The corridors of the Lateran Palace echoed with whispered debates. Cardinals argued whether the Templars should be restrained or allowed freedom. Some believed that crushing the assassins outright would secure victory for Christendom. Others warned that the assassins' knowledge, once lost, could never be regained, and that perhaps it was wiser to let them live, to keep their secrets close rather than bury them forever. The Church, after all, had long relied on absorbing the wisdom of its enemies. Meanwhile, outside Rome, ordinary believers knew nothing of this hidden drama. To them, the Templars were heroes, men who defended pilgrims and fought infidels. The assassins were barely known, their name whispered only in fearful tales carried by travelers from the East. The Vatican preferred it this way. The common faithful could not be burdened with doubts, nor could they be allowed to see that the Church itself played games of shadow and silence. But the Templars and assassins knew. Each watched the Vatican with wary eyes, aware that the Pope's blessing could turn to condemnation in an instant. Each suspected that Rome had plans not written in any holy text. This suspicion, in time, would deepen into mistrust and fuel the fires of conflict yet to come. Imagine Rome at dusk, its domes glowing golden in the fading sun, bells tolling across the city. In the apostolic palace, a scribe bends over parchment, writing words that will never be read by the public. A letter sealed with wax is sent quietly across the sea, carried by a trusted courier. The message inside is not for kings, not for armies, but for the hidden war. Perhaps it warns a Templar commander to tread carefully. Perhaps it whispers that an assassin's blade should be allowed to fall. The Vatican's hand, though unseen, was always present. And so, the war continued, not only in deserts and mountains, but also in the hearts of men who wondered whom they truly served. Were the Templars champions of Christ, or pawns of Rome? Were the assassins enemies of faith, or guardians of truths too dangerous for priests to speak? The Vatican's watchful eye saw everything, yet revealed nothing. The greatest secret of all was not that the Templars and assassins fought each other. It was that their war was permitted, even nurtured, by those who claimed to hold the keys of heaven. The hidden war between Templars and assassins was never static. Alliances shifted like sand, forged in secrecy and dissolved without warning. Both orders were guided by strategy, necessity, and survival. Neither acted purely from ideology alone. Sometimes enemies became temporary allies, bound by circumstances too complex for ordinary minds to understand. In the rugged mountains of Syria and Persia, the assassins maintained fortresses that seemed impossible to conquer. From these strongholds, they dispatched agents across cities and courts, observing kings and generals alike. Their reach was subtle but potent. A single message, a small act, could alter the course of events. To the Templars, these secret maneuvers were both a threat and a fascination. They had armies, yes, but the assassins wielded influence that no army could fully match. Reports suggest that in certain campaigns, Templar commanders and assassin leaders negotiated indirectly. Perhaps a castle would be spared because its capture might benefit neither side. Perhaps a ruler would be removed because both orders saw advantage in his death. These moments, hidden from public view, reveal a war more complex than open battles or sieges. It was a chess game, played with lives and secrets as pieces. Rome observed all of this with careful calculation. The Vatican understood that controlling the narrative was essential. Publicly, the Templars were defenders of Christendom. Publicly, the assassins were heretics to be feared. Privately, the Pope and his advisors weighed each action, each assassination, each alliance. Rome allowed certain events to unfold while quietly directing others. The Church's role was not always active, but always pervasive. Its influence threaded through the shadows, guiding the war without ever revealing itself. The assassins, for their part, recognized the Templars as formidable opponents. They were disciplined, well-trained, and armed with knowledge from lands far beyond their own. Yet the assassins valued subtlety over strength. Their victories were rarely announced. A general might die unexpectedly, a diplomat might vanish, and the resulting chaos would serve the assassin's aims. To the Templars, these acts were mysterious, frustrating, and at times terrifying. And yet, there was a grudging respect. Both orders knew that the other could destroy them with skill and precision. In Europe, the Templars consolidated power in ways invisible to most. Their estates, castles, and banks formed a network that spanned the continent. Merchants, nobles, and even kings relied on their resources. Behind this wealth was knowledge, maps, manuscripts, accounts, and strategies. Occasionally, fragments of this intelligence crossed paths with assassin secrets. Though records are scarce, historians speculate that these intersections were not accidental. Information, like a silent currency, flowed between the two orders in ways that only the most perceptive could detect. The Vatican's role in these alliances was subtle but critical. Rome allowed certain truce-like arrangements to continue, seeing them as a means of maintaining balance. By keeping the Templars and assassins occupied with each other, the Church preserved its own authority. This indirect control exemplifies the Vatican's darkest secret, a willingness to manipulate, guide, and sometimes tolerate actions that were morally ambiguous, all to protect the greater structure of power. Picture a quiet valley in the Levant, mist rising from the ground as dawn breaks. A Templar patrol moves through a narrow pass, wary but confident. Hidden among the rocks, an assassin observes, noting patterns, calculating timing. The two sides are aware of each other, yet in this moment, neither strikes. The sun rises, casting long shadows across the valley. This pause, this restraint, is not weakness, it is strategy. Both understand that patience can achieve more than brute force. The hidden war was not linear. Battles came and went, as did temporary truces. Information was exchanged secretly, alliances formed in whispers, and yet neither side could fully trust the other. This tension, maintained over decades, created a web of intrigue that was invisible to most but crucial to the balance of power. As you listen, imagine these subtle movements: a dagger left untouched, a castle bypassed, a letter exchanged under the cover of darkness. The story unfolds quietly, like the turning of a great clock, each motion deliberate, each decision echoing through time. In this way, the hidden war continued, guided by the war between Templars and assassins was fought not only with swords and daggers, but with knowledge. Ancient texts, secret maps, coded messages, and forbidden wisdom shaped the course of events more than any open battle ever could. Both orders recognized that information was power, and they guarded it jealously. To possess knowledge of the enemy's plans, of hidden routes, of alliances, was to hold the key to victory. Templars maintained vast libraries, hidden chambers filled with manuscripts collected from across Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. They studied mathematics, astronomy, military strategy, and the teachings of ancient civilizations. Each scroll and book held insights that could shift the balance of power. The assassins, meanwhile, relied on oral traditions, cryptic parchments, and a network of agents who moved silently through cities and castles. They recorded events in ways that were invisible to ordinary observers, passing information only to those who could be trusted implicitly. Betrayal was inevitable. Human nature, ambition, and fear ensured that no secret was ever perfectly guarded. Some Templars, seduced by wealth or threatened by exposure, revealed critical information to the assassins. Some assassins, under pressure or deception, handed over knowledge to Templar commanders. Each act of treachery shifted the war, sometimes subtly, sometimes catastrophically. And all of it, in ways, was watched by the Vatican. The Vatican had its own network of informants, spies, and agents. They did not fight openly, but they influenced events behind the scenes. Letters sealed with the papal wax, orders written in invisible ink, and secret instructions sent through trusted couriers ensured that Rome remained informed. By selectively revealing information or withholding it, the Church could manipulate outcomes without ever appearing to intervene. The true war was as much about controlling knowledge as it was about controlling territory. In certain cases, the assassins uncovered truths that the Templars, and even the Church, had tried to hide. Ancient relics, forgotten histories, and political conspiracies were among the treasures they sought. Possessing such knowledge could mean the difference between life and death, between power and destruction. Every secret held weight, every revelation rippled across the hidden world of espionage, assassination, and strategy. One striking example involved the recovery of manuscripts believed lost during the Crusades. The Templars, who had once guarded these texts in the Holy Land, had hidden portions in European strongholds. The assassins, through cunning infiltration and meticulous research, recovered fragments of these manuscripts, sometimes before the Templars even realized they were missing. This created a delicate tension, a continuous cycle of acquisition, loss, and reclamation that defined much of the hidden war. The Vatican's hand extended into these events in subtle ways. A recommendation here, a quiet admonishment there, an overlooked letter, each action shaped outcomes without drawing attention. Rome understood that the world watched the Church's outward behavior, but few suspected the intricate networks operating in silence. The Church's greatest strength lay in its ability to remain invisible while exerting influence everywhere. As the centuries passed, the lines between friend and foe blurred. Templar knights who once fought bravely alongside their brethren might secretly aid an assassin for personal reasons. Assassins might shelter a Templar for mutual advantage. Loyalties became fluid, adaptable, and almost impossible to trace. It was a world where appearances deceived, where silence often spoke louder than action, and where knowledge could kill more effectively than any blade. Consider a hidden chamber deep within a fortress. Scrolls, maps, and encoded letters are stacked carefully, watched over by a few trusted eyes. Outside, the sound of wind against stone is the only disturbance. A Templar spy may enter, reading silently, memorizing details, knowing that a single error could be fatal. Across the mountains, an assassin learns of the same documents through a different source, planning a subtle maneuver that will shift power in a region far away. The stage is set, yet the audience remains unaware. The hidden war was endless, a quiet storm raging beneath the surface of history. Every battle, every assassination, every recovered secret, and every betrayal left traces only visible to those who knew where to look. And the Vatican, ever watchful, ensured that the storm continued, for in its chaos lay control, and in secrecy lay power. As the centuries unfolded, the hidden war between Templars and assassins left a legacy more enduring than any battlefield conquest. Fortresses crumbled, empires rose and fell, yet the strategies, secrets, and subtle manipulations endured. The war became less about open combat and more about influence, ideology, and the quiet control of information. What remained was a network of shadows, whispers, and knowledge that shaped Europe, the Middle East, and beyond. The Templars, though officially disbanded in the early 14th century, left behind structures that continued to exert influence. Their banking networks, hidden archives, and remnants of military expertise persisted in secret societies, private collections, and unspoken codes. These relics of power quietly guided political decisions, economic strategies, and cultural developments long after their apparent disappearance. The assassins, too, adapted. Their order transformed, merging into new groups, adopting new techniques, and expanding their reach beyond the mountains of Persia and Syria. The principles of stealth, precision, and careful observation remained central. Their legacy influenced political intrigue, espionage practices, and covert operations, even as the original order faded from the public eye. Rome, ever watchful, continued its quiet orchestration. The Vatican's archives, rich with records of both orders, became a repository of understanding and control. Through selective preservation, the Church maintained a historical memory of the hidden war, carefully curating events to fit a narrative that protected its authority while allowing its secrets to endure. Few could glimpse the full scope of this manipulation. It was a silent empire within an empire, existing parallel to the visible world. Historians, both past and present, often encounter fragments of this war. Cryptic letters, unusual alliances, unexplained deaths, and strange coincidences. Many dismiss these as mere anomalies, yet when examined closely, a pattern emerges, a carefully orchestrated struggle, shaped by knowledge, strategy, and unseen guidance. The hidden war was less a series of battles than a living, breathing force shaping human events. Consider the cultural echoes left behind. Literature, architecture, and folklore bear subtle traces of Templar and assassin influence. Stories of knights, secret orders, hidden treasures, and unseen enemies echo the realities of this long conflict. Temples, towers, and labyrinthine passages in ancient cities whisper the tactics and methods of those who once moved unseen. Even today, a careful observer might recognize patterns in history that reflect the careful hand of these secret actors. The moral complexity of the war is profound. Templars acted under religious and political motives. Assassins operated with loyalty to principles and the preservation of hidden truths. Both orders engaged in acts that might be deemed ruthless or heroic, depending on perspective. The Vatican's involvement complicates this further, revealing that power often requires compromise, secrecy, and sometimes morally ambiguous choices. Understanding this layered history challenges simple judgments of right and wrong. For those who study the hidden war, patience is essential. Knowledge must be pieced together from fragments, legends, and historical records. Patterns emerge slowly, like the steady rise of the sun over a misty valley. One begins to perceive the subtle interplay of forces, the quiet victories, the unseen influences, and the delicate balance that sustained centuries of conflict. Imagine a quiet night, centuries after the final documented confrontations. The echoes of assassins moving through mountain passes, Templars riding along hidden roads, and papal agents observing silently, all linger in the air. These are shadows of a war that shaped nations, influenced power, and molded the course of history. The true battle was never fully seen, yet its effects are everywhere. As you reflect on this hidden war, remember that history is not merely a record of what was visible. It is shaped as much by what remains secret, by choices made in darkness, and by forces that operated beyond the gaze of the ordinary observer. The Templars and Assassins, once bitter enemies, now exist in memory, legend, and the ongoing influence of their actions. Rome, as ever, remains the silent witness, the keeper of secrets, and the orchestrator of a hidden war whose legacy endures in ways subtle, profound, and eternal. And so, as you drift into sleep, imagine the quiet valleys, the secret chambers, the shadowed corridors of power, and the delicate movements of those who shaped history unseen. Know that in the silence lies a story of courage, strategy, secrecy, and the timeless interplay between knowledge and power. The war is over, yet the echoes remain, whispering across the centuries, a reminder of the Vatican's darkest secret, the true war between Templars and Assassins, and the enduring mystery of history itself.